Rancher took in a runaway girl. She turned out to be the railroad tycoon's daughter. The wind rustled gently through the tall grass, carrying with it the familiar scents of hay, leather, and earth. Tom Harris, a middle-aged rancher with calloused hands and a kind heart, was finishing up his day. He had spent hours checking fences, feeding the horses, and making sure the cattle were safe before nightfall. Life on the ranch was never easy, but Tom had grown accustomed to its rhythm. He liked the predictability of it, the feeling of being grounded, of knowing that every day had its work, its challenges, and its rewards. As he walked along the edge of the property near the creek, Tom noticed something unusual. A small figure appeared through the tall grass, moving hesitantly and with great caution. At first, he thought it might be one of the local children playing near the fence, but as he approached, he realized this was no ordinary visitor. The girl looked tired, her clothes worn and slightly torn, and she carried only a small bag. Her hair was messy, and her face, though young, bore a look of worry and uncertainty that made Tom pause. "Hey there," Tom called gently, trying not to startle her. "Are you lost?" The girl froze, glancing around nervously. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and relief. After a moment she spoke softly, almost in a whisper, I don't have anywhere to go." Tom took a cautious step closer but kept his tone calm. "Well, you're here now. You can rest for a bit. Do you want some water?" The girl hesitated, then nodded slightly. She didn't say her name, didn't offer any explanation. There was something about her that told Tom she had been through a lot already, and perhaps she wasn't ready to trust anyone yet. He guided her to the small wooden porch of the ranch house, where a jug of water and a few glasses sat. The girl drank slowly, savoring every sip, as if it had been a long time since she had last felt safe or cared for. Tom didn't press her with questions. He had learned over the years that people, especially young ones, often revealed their stories in their own time. For now, he simply offered her a sandwich and a place to sit. She accepted the food quietly, her hands trembling slightly as she held it. Watching her, Tom couldn't help but wonder what kind of life had driven a young girl to wander alone near a ranch in the middle of nowhere. The thought made him uneasy, but he pushed it aside. Tonight, the most important thing was to make sure she was safe. After she had eaten, Tom suggested she rest inside. The ranch house was modest but warm, with wooden floors that creaked gently and a large fireplace that had cooled after the day's fire. He offered her a small bedroom with a simple bed and clean sheets. She looked at him, still hesitant, and finally whispered, "Thank you." Tom nodded. "No need to thank me. You're safe here tonight." As she settled into the bed, Tom returned to the porch to watch the sunset. He thought about his life on the ranch, how quiet it had been, how predictable. And now, this girl had appeared out of nowhere, bringing with her an air of mystery and urgency. He didn't know who she was, why she was running, or what dangers she had faced, but something about her presence stirred a protective instinct he hadn't felt in years. Night fell quickly over the ranch. The stars appeared one by one, twinkling in the clear sky. The ranch was silent except for the occasional rustle of the wind through the trees and the distant calls of nocturnal birds. Tom went about his usual evening routine, checking the barn one last time, making sure the animals were settled. Every now and then he would glance toward the house, wondering if the girl had fallen asleep. Inside, the girl lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had been running for days, moving from town to town, never staying in one place for long. She had avoided authorities, avoided anyone who might recognize her, and now, for the first time in a long while, she felt a strange sense of relief. The man who had taken her in didn't ask her questions, didn't judge her. He simply offered her kindness. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten existed. As the hours passed, she finally drifted into a restless sleep, the kind of sleep that carried dreams of both hope and fear. Outside, Tom remained on the porch, thinking about what the next days might bring. He didn't know her story yet, and he didn't try to guess. All he knew was that she needed shelter, food, and a moment of safety, and that was something he could give her. The next morning, the ranch was filled with its usual sounds, the lowing of cattle, the neighing of horses, and the clatter of boots on wooden floors. The girl emerged from her room, looking a little more rested but still cautious. Tom greeted her with a warm smile and offered breakfast. She accepted, and as they ate, Tom noticed the way she observed everything around her, the way she watched the animals, the way she studied the routines of ranch life. It was clear that she was intelligent and curious, despite the hardships she had endured. Over the following days, Tom began to learn small details about her. She was careful not to share too much, revealing only that she had left a home that felt suffocating, that she had wanted freedom, and that she had nowhere else to go. Tom respected her privacy, understanding that trust could not be forced. Instead, he showed her the rhythms of ranch life, how to feed the horses, how to mend fences, how to check the water troughs for the cattle. Slowly, she began to participate, her movements becoming more confident, her laughter more frequent. The bond between them grew quietly but steadily. Tom admired her resilience, the way she faced new tasks with determination, even when unsure of herself. And the girl, in turn, began to see Tom not just as a guardian for the moment, but as someone who genuinely cared about her well-being. It was a bond built not on words but on shared work, trust, and unspoken understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon once again, Tom noticed the girl sitting by the fence, staring out at the distant hills. He approached quietly and sat beside her. For a while, they simply watched the sky together. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me stay here, for not asking too many questions." Tom smiled. "Sometimes people just need a place to breathe. That's all I can give for now." The girl nodded, feeling the truth in his words. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt safe enough to rest, to think, to imagine a future that wasn't filled with fear. And for Tom, the quiet ranch that had once felt predictable and lonely was now filled with the presence of someone who needed him, and someone whose story he wanted to protect, even if he didn't yet understand it fully. As the night deepened, the ranch settled into silence again, but the sense of anticipation lingered in the air. Both Tom and the girl knew that her arrival was only the beginning of a journey neither of them could yet predict. There were questions to be answered, challenges ahead, and secrets waiting to be revealed. But for now, in the safety of the ranch, they could simply exist in the moment. A rancher and a runaway girl brought together by chance, trust, and the simple act of kindness. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. And as Tom turned in for the night, he felt a quiet determination settle in his chest. Whoever this girl was, whatever her past held, he would protect her, guide her, and help her find a place where she could breathe, grow, and feel safe. Tomorrow, the story would continue, but tonight, the ranch was a sanctuary, and that was enough. The days following the girl's arrival on the Harris Ranch passed quietly, yet the air was filled with subtle changes that both Tom and the girl could feel. Each morning began the same way, the sun rising over the hills, casting long shadows across the fields, and the ranch awakening with the sounds of animals stretching, calling, and moving about. For the girl, who Tom had learned to call Emma after she finally whispered her name one morning, the routine was strange and unfamiliar, but in its own way comforting. She had spent so much of her young life running, hiding, and fearing the world, that the predictability of the ranch was like a balm for her frayed nerves. Tom started teaching Emma the small but essential tasks of ranch life. The first lesson was feeding the horses. Emma stood nervously beside Tom as he opened the feed sack, letting the smell of oats and hay fill the air. "Start with the mares first," Tom said, handing her a bucket. "Approach slowly. Horses can sense fear, so just be calm." Emma nodded, gripping the bucket tightly. She moved toward the nearest horse, a chestnut mare with a gentle expression. She remembered everything she had learned about staying quiet and steady, about keeping her movements predictable. The mare sniffed her hand and then began eating from the bucket, and for a moment Emma felt a spark of accomplishment. She had done something right. "See," Tom said with a small smile, "you're learning fast. Just remember to breathe and stay steady." That evening, after the chores were done, Emma sat on the porch, her hands wrapped around a cup of warm tea. She watched the sun sink behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The silence felt different from the silence she had known while running through the streets of her old life. Here, the quiet was peaceful, almost welcoming. She realized that for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the constant tug of fear. She didn't have to look over her shoulder. Tom joined her after a while, carrying a small basket of freshly baked bread. "You're quiet today," he said, settling beside her. I like it here," Emma admitted softly. "It feels safe, and I don't have to pretend or hide." Tom nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "That's what I want for you, for now at least, just to have a safe place where you can breathe and be yourself." Over the next week, Emma began to settle into a routine. She would wake early, help with the animals, and gradually take on more responsibilities around the ranch. Tom noticed how careful she was, how attentive to details, and how quickly she adapted. But more than that, he noticed the way she observed him. There was a quiet curiosity in her eyes, as if she were trying to understand the man who had given her shelter without asking for anything in return. One afternoon, Tom asked Emma to help him mend a broken fence along the northern boundary. It was hard work, the kind that required both strength and patience. Emma struggled at first, but Tom guided her with calm instructions and gentle encouragement. As they worked side by side, hammering and measuring, she began to relax into the rhythm. She laughed when she dropped a nail or hit the wood at the wrong angle, and Tom chuckled with her. "You know," Tom said, wiping sweat from his forehead, "I've seen a lot of people try ranch work for the first time, and most of them give up before they even start. But you've got grit." Emma looked at him, surprised. "Grit," she repeated. Tom nodded. "Yeah, the kind of grit that keeps you going even when it's hard. Not many people have that." For Emma, the word felt strange but true. She had spent so much of her life running from problems, avoiding trouble and trying to survive. Yet here, on the ranch, she was learning a new kind of strength. The strength to face challenges, to persist, and to contribute to something bigger than herself. As the days turned into weeks, Emma's confidence grew. She learned to ride horses with ease, to care for the cattle, and even to help in the kitchen, preparing simple meals for herself and Tom. She began to share small details of her life in the city, though always cautiously. She spoke of grand buildings, crowded streets, and a home that had felt cold and controlled despite its wealth. She didn't speak of her family by name, only of the pressures and expectations she had faced. Tom listened, never pushing her for more than she was willing to share, and in return, Emma started to trust him more deeply. One evening, as they sat by the fire after a long day, Emma finally opened up more than she had before. "I've never had a place where I could just be," she said softly, staring into the flames. "Back home, everything was rules and appearances. If I made a mistake, there were consequences, always consequences." Tom nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like you've carried a heavy load for someone your age." Emma looked at him, her eyes shining. "I thought maybe I could just disappear and no one would notice. I wanted freedom, even if it was just for a little while." Tom's expression softened. "Freedom is important. And sometimes you need to find your own place in the world before anyone else can understand it. That's why I'm glad you're here, for now at least. You have a place where you can breathe, where you can make mistakes without fear." Her lips curved into a small, grateful smile. For the first time, Emma felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. She realized that trust didn't have to be earned through grand gestures or words. It could grow quietly, through shared work, patience, and kindness. As the days passed, the bond between Tom and Emma deepened in subtle ways. They didn't always need to speak. Sometimes just being in each other's presence was enough. They shared meals, chores, and quiet moments watching the sun rise and set over the rolling hills. Emma began to help Tom with the bookkeeping for the ranch, learning how to track expenses and manage supplies. She took pride in small accomplishments, feeling a sense of purpose that had been missing from her life. One afternoon, while Emma was tending to the chickens, a neighbor rode up on horseback. He was curious about the new girl on the ranch, but seeing her calm and confident demeanor, he decided not to ask too many questions. Emma smiled politely and continued her work, realizing that she could navigate the outside world in her own way, even if only a little at a time. At night, when the work was done and the ranch was quiet, Emma would sometimes stand by the fence and look out at the distant hills, imagining a life where she could be free and safe at the same time. She had begun to understand that freedom wasn't just about running away. It was also about finding a place where she could grow, learn, and trust. Tom noticed these moments, understanding that she was slowly learning to feel at home, even in a world that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving. One particularly warm evening, as fireflies danced around the porch, Tom handed Emma a small notebook. "Here," he said. "You can write down your thoughts, plans, or anything you want. Sometimes putting things on paper helps make sense of them." Emma accepted it, feeling a warmth in her chest. She had never been encouraged to express herself, to take time for reflection. For the first time, she felt that her thoughts and feelings mattered, that someone cared enough to offer her the space to grow. Weeks turned into a month, and Emma had become a familiar presence on the ranch. She knew the routines, the animals, and the small quirks of the land. Tom admired her adaptability and her determination, and he began to think of her not just as a runaway girl in need of shelter, but as someone who had become part of the rhythm of the ranch itself. One morning, as they worked together to repair a section of fence damaged by a recent storm, Tom paused and looked at Emma. "You know," he said, "you're stronger than you realize, not just in body but in spirit. Whatever comes next, you'll handle it." Emma smiled, feeling a quiet pride. For the first time in a long while, she believed him. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that for now, she had found a place where she could rest, learn, and grow. And perhaps, she thought quietly, that was enough. The sun set behind the hills once more, casting long shadows across the ranch. Tom and Emma stood together, side by side, watching the colors fade from the sky. There was a sense of peace, of a fragile but growing trust. Both knew that challenges were still ahead, but for the moment, they were content in the simple truth that they had found each other, and that, in itself, was a beginning. The early morning on the Harris Ranch began like any other. The sun peeked over the hills, spilling golden light across the fields, the animals stirring quietly as the day awakened. Emma had become a familiar presence on the ranch, moving with confidence among the horses, cattle, and chores. She had learned the rhythms of the land, the subtle signs of weather, the quiet language of animals that Tom had always known instinctively. And yet beneath her calm exterior, there was a tension she could not ignore, the sense that her past, which she had tried so hard to escape, was still somewhere out there, waiting. Tom noticed the change in her that morning as she fed the horses. She moved carefully, but her eyes kept flicking to the distant road that ran along the edge of the property. "What is it?" Tom asked softly, approaching her. Emma shook her head quickly. "Nothing, just thinking." Tom nodded, accepting her answer. He had learned not to push her too much. She would share when she was ready. Still, he could sense the unease in her, a quiet anxiety that seemed to hum beneath the surface of her calm routine. They finished the morning chores together, repairing fences and filling water troughs. The sun climbed higher, warming the ranch, and everything seemed normal, peaceful, even. But that calm was shattered in a way neither of them could have expected. It started with the sound of an engine, distant but unmistakable. Emma's head jerked toward the road and her heart skipped a beat. She froze, gripping the bucket of feed in her hands. Tom squinted down the road, his experience telling him that the vehicle was no ordinary traveler. A sleek black car was approaching, its polished body gleaming in the morning sun. It moved steadily, deliberately, with a presence that suggested importance, wealth, and authority. "Stay calm," Tom said quietly, stepping in front of Emma. "Let's see who it is first." The car slowed as it reached the ranch, stopping neatly near the gate. The engine hummed softly as the driver opened the door and a man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit that seemed almost out of place in the dusty, sun-baked landscape. His hair was streaked with gray and his eyes were sharp, commanding attention without effort. The air around him seemed to shift, carrying an aura of authority and power. Tom's instincts went immediately into alert mode. He did not recognize the man, but he could tell from his posture and presence that this was someone important. Emma, however, knew instinctively who he was. Her face went pale and her hands trembled. She took a step back, gripping Tom's arm. "It's him," she whispered. "That's my father." Tom looked at her surprised. "Your father?" Emma nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, I ran away from him. I didn't want to be found." Her voice was barely audible, trembling with a mix of fear and guilt. The man approached, his eyes locking onto Emma with a sharp intensity that made her heart race. He stopped a few feet away, his posture stiff but controlled. "Emma," he said firmly, though not unkindly, "I've been looking for you. You can't keep running forever." Emma's mouth opened, but no words came. She felt trapped between the world she had escaped and the life she had started to build on the ranch. Her pulse pounded in her chest as the reality of her past confronted her so suddenly, so directly. Tom stepped slightly forward, placing himself subtly between them. "Who are you?" he asked, calm but steady, his voice carrying the weight of authority he had earned on the ranch over the years. The man's eyes softened slightly as he glanced at Tom. "I am Richard Caldwell," he said. "I believe you know me as your father, Emma." Emma's eyes widened. She had always feared that day might come, but seeing him here, standing tall and composed, was far more intimidating than she had imagined. She wanted to flee, to disappear again, but the safety she had felt at the ranch held her in place. Tom studied the man carefully, sensing the power and influence he carried. He could see why Emma had been afraid. This was a man used to getting what he wanted, a man who commanded respect and attention. But he also sensed a gentleness beneath the surface, a complexity that suggested he was more than just the stern figure Emma remembered. "Emma," Caldwell continued, his tone softer now, though still firm, "you are my daughter. I understand you have your reasons for leaving, but it's time we talk. You cannot live on the run forever. There are things you need to know, things only I can explain." Emma's eyes flicked to Tom, silently pleading for support. Tom gave her a small, reassuring nod. He did not push her to answer, understanding that this was her choice. He had learned in the past weeks that forcing her to do something against her will would only push her further away. Emma began, her voice quivering. I don't know if I can go with you. I'm not ready." Caldwell sighed, the first sign of vulnerability Emma had ever seen in him. "I know you're scared, and I don't expect you to make decisions lightly, but you have to understand that I care for you. I want to provide for you to protect you. That's why I'm here." Tom watched the interaction quietly, noting the mixture of emotions swirling around them. Emma's fear, her hesitation, her longing for independence, and Caldwell's authority, concern, and desire to reconnect. All of it created a tension that was almost tangible. Emma stepped back, gripping her small bag tightly. I've been safe here," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I have a place where I can breathe. I don't want to leave that yet." Caldwell nodded slowly as if he had anticipated this response. I understand. I don't want to take that from you, but I need you to know who I am, who we are. There will be questions, explanations, and decisions to make. You cannot hide from that forever. Tom spoke gently, sensing Emma's need for reassurance. You don't have to decide anything right now, Emma. You can take your time, but you should hear him out. He's not here to hurt you. Emma glanced at Tom, then back at her father. She felt a wave of conflicting emotions, fear, relief, curiosity, and a strange sense of longing. She had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. She realized that she wanted answers, even if it meant confronting the part of her life she had tried to escape. Okay, she said finally, her voice barely audible. I'll listen. But I'm not leaving today. Caldwell smiled faintly, relief and pride flickering in his eyes. That's all I ask, just to talk. That's all I want. Tom guided Emma to a shaded spot under a large oak tree near the house, offering her a seat. She sat, still gripping her bag, as Caldwell took a seat opposite her. The tension in the air was palpable, but there was also a strange sense of hope. This was the first step toward understanding, toward reconciling the past with the present. Caldwell began to speak gently, recounting parts of her life that Emma had barely remembered. Her early childhood, her accomplishments, and the expectations placed on her by the family and the world. He explained the pressures she had faced, not as an accusation, but as context, helping her understand why certain decisions had been made and why she had felt so trapped. Emma listened intently, her emotions shifting between anger, sadness, and understanding. She realized that her father was not the villain she had imagined, but a man shaped by responsibility, duty, and concern. He was flawed, yes, but he had genuinely cared for her all along, even if his methods had been strict and sometimes distant. Tom observed quietly, proud of Emma's willingness to face her past and of Caldwell's effort to reach out without forcing her hand. The ranch, which had been a sanctuary for Emma, had become the safe space where this pivotal moment could unfold. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, Emma finally spoke. I don't know what to say, she admitted. I didn't expect to see you here, and I don't know if I'm ready to go back yet. Caldwell nodded, understanding. You don't have to decide now, take your time. I will respect whatever choice you make. Just know that I am here and I will wait. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt a strange sense of calm. She realized that she had the freedom to make her own choices, even with the past closing in around her. And she realized that, no matter what happened next, she had people who cared for her, both the father she had once feared and the rancher who had given her safety and trust. That evening, as Caldwell departed with the promise to return the next day, Emma stood by the fence and watched the black car disappear down the road. She turned to Tom, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. Thank you, she whispered. For letting me decide on my own. Tom smiled. That's what I do, Emma. You'll find your own way, and whatever happens next, you're strong enough to handle it. The stars began to appear in the sky, twinkling over the ranch, as if witnessing the quiet but profound changes in Emma's life. The world beyond the hills was complex and full of challenges, but for now, the ranch remained a place of safety, growth, and hope. And Emma knew that, with each passing day, she would find the courage to face whatever came next. The days following her father's unexpected visit were filled with a quiet tension that Emma could not shake. Life on the ranch carried on as usual. The cattle needed feeding, the horses had to be groomed, and the fences had to be repaired. But Emma moved with a restlessness that Tom noticed immediately. She completed her chores with her usual care, but her mind was elsewhere, turning over thoughts she had tried to ignore. Her father's words echoed in her mind, the promise to talk, the acknowledgement of her fear, and the gentle insistence that she could not hide forever. Tom observed her from a distance during the morning chores, careful not to pry. He had come to understand that Emma needed space to process her emotions, that she needed time to reconcile the safety and freedom she had found on the ranch with the past that had caught up with her so abruptly. He respected her silence, offering only occasional words of encouragement. "Take your time, Emma. There's no rush," he said one morning as she paused to watch the horses grazing in the field. Emma nodded, grateful for his patience. The ranch had become her sanctuary, a place where she could breathe and think without fear. But the arrival of her father had reminded her that the world outside was still very real, still demanding, and still capable of changing everything she had begun to build. She felt a strange mix of emotions: curiosity about the man she barely knew, fear of the life he represented, and a quiet longing for understanding and connection. Over the next few days, Emma began to reflect deeply on her choices. She thought about her time running through crowded streets, hiding in small rooms, and avoiding anyone who might recognize her. That life had been exhausting, filled with uncertainty and fear. And yet, she also thought about the quiet moments on the ranch, the mornings when the sun warmed her face, the evenings when the fireflies danced around the porch, the sound of Tom's voice guiding her through the work, and the feeling of accomplishment after completing a difficult task. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of stability, of belonging, and of hope. One afternoon, Tom asked Emma to help him check the irrigation system for the pastures. As they walked together through the fields, he noticed her thoughtful silence and decided to speak gently. "I know your father's visit must have shaken you," he said. "It's normal to feel conflicted, but remember, you have choices. You don't have to decide everything at once." Emma looked at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and uncertainty. "I know, Tom, it's just, I don't know how to feel. Part of me wants to see him, to understand why he's been so distant, and part of me, I just want to stay here where I feel safe." Tom nodded, understanding completely. "It's okay to feel that way. You're allowed to have both feelings at the same time. The important thing is to take one step at a time, at your own pace." Emma smiled faintly, feeling a small measure of relief. She had been carrying the weight of her father's expectations and her own fears alone, and Tom's words reminded her that she didn't have to face everything at once. She could find her own way, guided by her instincts and the support of those who cared for her. That evening, Emma sat on the porch with her notebook, reflecting on her thoughts and feelings. She wrote about her time on the ranch, the lessons she had learned, and the sense of peace she had found. She also wrote about her father, trying to make sense of the man who had been a distant presence in her life, yet now stood before her with concern and authority. Writing helped her organize her thoughts, allowing her to confront the mix of emotions swirling inside her without feeling overwhelmed. The next morning, a letter arrived from her father, delivered by a courier who had tracked down the ranch. Emma opened it with trembling hands, revealing a neatly written note. "Dear Emma, please take care of yourself." Father Emma read the note twice, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. Her father's words were kind and understanding, yet they reminded her of the inevitable decisions that lay ahead. She showed the note to Tom, who smiled gently. "See, he's giving you the space you need. You don't have to rush into anything." Days turned into a week, and Emma began to consider meeting her father on her own terms. She realized that avoiding him indefinitely would not solve anything, and that understanding her past could help her make informed choices about her future. She discussed her thoughts with Tom, who encouraged her to follow her instincts and take control of the situation. "I want to meet him," Emma admitted one afternoon as they finished repairing a fence together. "But I want to do it in my own way, on my terms. I need to understand who he is and why things happened the way they did." Tom nodded approvingly. "That's wise. You're in control of this, Emma. You set the pace, you ask the questions, and you decide what you want from the meeting. I'll support you, no matter what." Emma felt a surge of confidence. She realized that she had grown stronger on the ranch, learning to trust herself and her judgment. The lessons she had absorbed, from feeding the animals to managing small responsibilities, had not only prepared her for life on the ranch, but also for the challenges that lay beyond its boundaries. The day finally came when Emma decided to meet her father. She chose to walk down to the main road, taking the path she had once dreaded, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. Tom accompanied her to the edge of the property, standing silently as she prepared to face the man who had shaped her life from a distance. When her father's car arrived, Emma took a deep breath and stepped forward. Caldwell greeted her with a warm but cautious smile, acknowledging her decision to approach on her own terms. The tension that had filled the air in his previous visit was replaced by a quiet curiosity and a willingness to listen. Emma realized that this encounter was not about submission or compliance, but about understanding, dialogue, and the opportunity to shape her own relationship with her father. For hours, they talked under the shade of a large oak tree, discussing the past, the choices that had led to her departure, and the expectations that had shaped her early life. Emma listened intently, asking questions when she needed clarity and expressing her feelings honestly. Caldwell responded with patience and honesty, acknowledging his shortcomings as a parent and explaining the pressures and responsibilities that had influenced his actions. Through this conversation, Emma began to see her father as a complex individual, flawed, yes, but capable of care, understanding, and growth. She realized that the fear she had carried for so long was not entirely justified, that he had genuinely wanted the best for her even when his methods had seemed harsh. And she recognized that her own strength and independence had grown because of the choices she had made and the experiences she had gained on the ranch. By the end of the day, Emma and her father had not solved every problem or answered every question, but they had established a foundation of communication, trust, and mutual respect. Emma felt a sense of relief and clarity that she had not experienced in years. She understood that her life was not defined solely by the past she had left behind, but also by the choices she could make moving forward. When she returned to the ranch that evening, Tom greeted her with a quiet smile. "How did it go?" he asked gently. Emma smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "Better than I expected. I understand him more, and I think he understands me too. It's a start." Tom nodded, proud of her courage and maturity. "That's all anyone can ask for, a start. You've handled this with strength and thoughtfulness. I'm proud of you, Emma." That night, as the stars emerged over the ranch, Emma reflected on the events of the past days. She realized that life was not about avoiding challenges or hiding from difficult situations, but about facing them with honesty, courage, and a willingness to learn. She had found strength in herself, in Tom's guidance, and in the cautious but genuine connection with her father. The ranch, which had once been her sanctuary from the world, had now become the place where she could prepare for the future, a place of reflection, growth, and understanding. Emma knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more choices to make, and more moments that tested her courage. But she also knew that she was ready, equipped with the lessons she had learned, the trust she had built, and the love she had discovered in the simplest acts of kindness. As the night deepened, the ranch was quiet once more, the animals resting peacefully and the wind whispering through the trees. Emma stood by the fence for a moment, looking out at the hills, feeling a sense of peace that she had never known before. She had faced the past, begun to understand it, and claimed her right to make decisions for her own life. And in that quiet, reflective moment, she realized that she was no longer simply a runaway girl. She was someone who had learned to navigate life with courage, compassion, and clarity. The days following Emma's first meeting with her father passed, with a strange mixture of calm and tension. Life on the ranch returned to its familiar rhythm. The cattle needed feeding, The horses required grooming, and fences always demanded attention. But Emma felt a subtle shift inside herself. She carried a newfound sense of clarity, a sense that she was no longer running from her past but slowly learning how to face it, understand it, and make choices that belonged to her alone. Tom noticed the change immediately. Emma moved with more confidence, her shoulders straighter, her gaze steadier. She still paused sometimes to watch the horizon, lost in thought, but now there was purpose behind her silence. "You seem different," Tom remarked one morning as they repaired a broken gate together. "Stronger somehow," Emma smiled faintly. "I think I understand more now, about him, about myself, about what I want." Tom nodded, understanding that she was referring to her father. "That's good," he said. "Understanding is the first step. The next is deciding what you want to do with it." For days, Emma reflected deeply. She thought about the freedom she had found on the ranch, the quiet mornings, the laughter that sometimes bubbled up as she worked alongside Tom, the feeling of accomplishment after completing chores. She thought about her father, the man she had once feared, the man she had begun to understand, the man who had come to find her and respected her need for time. The weight of expectation pressed against her, but she no longer felt trapped by it. Instead, she felt empowered to choose her path. Finally, one evening, after a long day of work, she made a decision. She walked to the porch where Tom was sitting, sipping tea, the sun low on the horizon, casting warm golden light over the fields. "Tom," she said softly, "I think I'm ready to see him again. I want to meet him properly, to understand him, and maybe start building something real with him." Tom's eyes softened. "I think that's a good choice, Emma. You're ready and you'll go on your own terms. That's what matters." The next day, Emma and Tom walked down to the road together. Her father's car arrived promptly, gleaming in the sunlight. Emma felt a flutter of nerves but also a sense of control. She had decided how this meeting would go, and she was determined to engage openly and honestly. Caldwell stepped out of the car, smiling warmly at her. "Good to see you again, Emma," he said. "Shall we talk?" They walked together under the large oak tree at the edge of the property, the place where they had spoken during their first encounter. Emma's heart pounded, but she kept her composure. They began to talk, not as father and daughter divided by fear, but as two people trying to understand each other. Emma asked the questions she had long held inside, about his decisions, his expectations, and his absence. Caldwell responded with honesty, explaining the pressures of his life, the responsibilities he bore, and the love he had always felt for her, even when he struggled to express it properly. For hours they spoke. Emma listened, sometimes interrupting with her own thoughts, her own feelings, her own reflections. She realized that her father was human, flawed, but capable of love and understanding. She saw that he was willing to adapt, to listen, and to respect her independence. And for the first time, she felt the fear that had haunted her for so long begin to melt away. When the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch, Emma took a deep breath. I don't want to lose the life I've built here," she admitted, her voice steady. "I've grown stronger and I've learned so much. I want to stay true to that." Caldwell nodded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and relief. "I wouldn't take that from you," he said gently. "I want you to be yourself, to follow your own path. If that means spending time on the ranch, learning, growing, and becoming the person you want to be, then I will support it." Emma felt a wave of gratitude. She realized that the fear she had carried for so long, the fear of judgment, of control, of losing herself, was no longer necessary. Her father had acknowledged her independence and her strength, and he had given her the space to make choices for herself. Over the following weeks, Emma's relationship with her father grew slowly but steadily. He visited the ranch regularly, helping with small tasks, sharing stories of his own childhood, and learning about the life she had built with Tom. They laughed together, sometimes argued gently, and gradually formed a bond that was built on understanding and mutual respect rather than fear or obligation. Tom remained a steady presence throughout, offering guidance, support, and quiet reassurance. He never tried to push Emma toward her father or force her to make decisions she wasn't ready for. Instead, he encouraged her to trust herself, to embrace her strengths, and to navigate the complexities of her life at her own pace. Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude for him. He had given her the freedom to grow while also providing safety and care when she needed it most. One evening, as they all sat together on the porch, watching the sunset over the hills, Emma reflected on how far she had come. She had arrived on the ranch a frightened, uncertain runaway girl, unsure of who she was or where she belonged. Now she was a young woman with confidence, resilience, and a sense of purpose. She had faced her fears, confronted her past, and begun to build relationships based on trust and understanding. Her father turned to her, his eyes kind and thoughtful. "Emma, I know we can't change the past, but I am proud of who you are becoming. You've shown courage, intelligence, and integrity, and I want to support you in whatever path you choose." Emma smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. "Thank you," she said, "for understanding, for listening, and for giving me a choice. I couldn't have done this without the ranch, without Tom, without the time to grow and learn who I really am." Tom placed a hand gently on her shoulder, a silent gesture of pride and encouragement. Emma knew that the ranch would always be her home, the place where she had discovered her strength and independence, and the foundation for the life she was now building. As the weeks turned into months, Emma continued to divide her time between the ranch and occasional visits with her father. She learned about the family business, participated in decisions when she felt ready, and maintained the routines and responsibilities that had grounded her on the ranch. The balance allowed her to grow in both worlds, to embrace her heritage without losing herself, to honor her past without being controlled by it. Through it all, Emma realized that the most important lessons she had learned were not about wealth, status, or power. They were about trust, courage, and the value of having people who care for you. She had found that on the ranch with Tom, and she had begun to rediscover it with her father. The combination of these relationships gave her confidence, resilience, and a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. One crisp morning, as Emma rode along the hills with Tom, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything that had happened. She had escaped a life that felt confining, found safety and trust on the ranch, and faced the fears and uncertainties of reconnecting with her father. She realized that her journey had taught her not only how to survive, but how to live fully, thoughtfully, and courageously. "That's the thing about life," Tom said, breaking the silence. "Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the strongest growth. You've done more than survive, Emma. You've become stronger than you ever imagined." Emma smiled, feeling the truth in his words. She knew her journey was far from over, but she also knew she had the tools, the guidance, and the inner strength to face whatever came next. The ranch had given her roots, her father had given her understanding, and together they had given her the ability to choose her own future. As the sun set behind the hills, Emma looked out at the fields, the animals grazing peacefully, and the soft glow of the ranch house in the distance. She felt a profound sense of accomplishment and hope. She had faced her fears, confronted her past, and discovered the courage to make her own decisions. She was no longer just a runaway girl. She was someone who had learned to balance freedom, responsibility, and love, shaping a life that was truly her own. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the quiet promise of new beginnings. And for the first time in a long while, Emma felt fully at peace, knowing that she had the freedom to live her life on her own terms, supported by the people who truly cared for her. The ranch, the hills, the horses, and the quiet routines of daily life had transformed into symbols of strength, growth, and hope. Emma understood that while the world beyond the hills could be challenging and unpredictable, she now possessed the courage and wisdom to navigate it. And as she looked at the horizon, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would meet them with resilience, grace, and the confidence of someone who had found both a home and herself.